I'm at least basically competent so that I don't hurt myself, because, you look at some sports, they might have a very high kind of baseline threshold for you to not hurt yourself because there's a steeper learning curve. Ice hockey being one of them, because you have to learn how to skate, then you have to there's kind of layers to it. Whereas soccer, everybody grew up playing soccer for the most part. Everybody, when they were 5 years old, your parents signed you up for the blue team, so there's at least a very low barrier to entry where if you're decently fit, if you're relatively strong, you can kind of get away with, I think, benefit with a relatively low risk of injury.
And that's when I realized I hate running and I'd rather be a goalie.
I just like to point out.
That's the reason I started playing hockey.
I just like to point out I never played soccer until grad school. So.
Really? Rob, did you ever play soccer?
Yeah. I was that kid that played defense that just kicked the ball out of bounds every time it came
in. Amazing. I love it. One more follow-up question before we move to the next topic. Aaliyah brought up a really good point, talking about a lot of athletes don't have an off season. So when we're looking at, and I think all of you can speak to this as progressions and, whether you're on a strength cycle, a gymnastics cycle, endurance, what have you, where could there then be room for an outside sport to fit in, and should it?
I think it comes down to prioritizing what competitions mean the most to you and then peaking your season around those. I think if you are, looking at, okay, we have the games and then Rogue and Waza, Dubai, all these things. It's as an elite athlete with this sport, I don't think it's possible to be peaked for every single one of those. So kind of sitting down with your team, with your coach and stuff like that, and figuring out, okay, what are the ones that are really important to me to be the most ready for? And then figuring out where you can have those, kind of quote unquote off seasons to do other things while still doing your training. Because I think when we're outside of games training, I don't think our athletes need to be in the gym, that 6 to 7 hours a day like they do in season. So I think being able to prioritize some different things while peaking for certain shows is really where that could work.
I think it also depends. I think it also depends on the specific athlete and the holes or weaknesses that they have. For some athletes, depending on what their goal is, if they have a pretty significant hole in their CrossFit, they might not have the time or the opportunity to be focusing on another sport in the off season because they need to focus on filling their hole for the next season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think, we've had this conversation with some of our semifinal athletes that are getting close to breaking through to the games. And it's we had one athlete just do Rogue, a couple weeks ago and was all fired up and ready. He's all right, we got to do some game style stuff. And it's you have to temper that excitement with we need to get to the games first, and so that goes to what Aaliyah says, some athletes, until you are good enough at the core of CrossFit that will get you to the games, we don't need to be draining energy away from that progress to go do these other things. Except in very special circumstances where you have a very competent athlete who needs to get better at this one thing, and then they will probably make the games. Then you can start to do a little bit more kind of well-rounded training throughout the season. And I mean, I went through that personally. We didn't work on swimming for a couple of years because it was I just need you just need to get to the games first. And once you get to the games and you're confident that you're at a level where you can get to the games consistently, then yes, I'm going to swim twice a year or twice a week year round. Then we're going to start to incorporate that more often. And that's just an example for again, from my experience, but.
Okay. Good discussion. I think Sean's in the background nodding his head that every athlete should do a little bit of hockey, but he might be biased to that. Moving on now to topic number 2. We already know it's not happening, or at least we think it's not happening because you never really know what's going to happen until it's in ink. As semifinals, it will return. But as we've been discussing how to make CrossFit more professional, how to give athletes more opportunities, whether to have appearances or make money, how could CrossFit incorporate sanctionals, the model, back into the season? And should they? This is kind of just an open discussion. I'm really curious on everybody's take here. Tim, I'm going to let you start this round.
All right. I mean, yeah, like I think athletes do need earning opportunities, and we need opportunities outside of the CrossFit Games to make money. Everybody's been tossing around this kind of triple crown idea. I think the biggest thing to incorporating it into the season is that it needs to have some value towards the CrossFit Game season and vice versa. Like there has to be some level of carryover that is in writing and set so that athletes know that like, hey, if I go to Rogue and I do really well, that will somehow positively also affect my game season, not only just be an earning opportunity for me. I think that's the biggest thing is that it needs to be very concise and there needs to be basically a lot of buy-in and carryover across the game season and these couple of sanctioned events that are basically kind of looped in. Again, the big drawback of the sanctional season was just that there was far too much. It was overwhelming for athletes from an administrative standpoint, from a viewership standpoint. There was just too much going on. So I think mostly it needs to be dumbed down to be like start small and then get bigger. You know, you look at a sport like golf where you've got, 40 some odd events throughout the season that you can earn points in, you can go through that process. I think CrossFit needs to start small and figure out how can we have athletes feel like these events are not only beneficial to them, but they can also use their open scoring, their semifinal scoring, their game scoring, whatever, to kind of relay back to these. And again, maybe that means a prize purse for the highest points across all of them so that if you compete in multiple, there's an additional prize purse, kind of like the FedEx Cup-ish, not really, type thing for golf, where if you do really well, if you come in